Hello and welcome. Welcome to 2026, where we will continue with these talks and continuing with your comments and questions here. In fact, New Year's Eve and day passed rather as usual. I was forgetting yesterday when describing the traditional New Year celebrations here in Sri Lanka of cleaning and cooking and associated festivities. That applies to the New Year in April, which, similar to Thai tradition, is when New Year is celebrated in this part of the world. So apart from what goes on in the hotels here, but some distance away, there's business as usual, so to speak, which is great. I continue with my practice uninterrupted, and also with your questions. So we touched on one yesterday, I think, which asked, I would like to ask a few things. How long have you been practicing? And as I explained, although I've been formally practicing in this Buddhist tradition, my meditation for over 10 years now, even prior to that, there was a good deal of preparation. But we must remember what we have done in previous lifetimes is always going to count towards our attainments in this lifetime. So we'll hear in the suttas where some arahants might listen to just a few words of the Buddha, or some patuchanas, let's say, so unenlightened people would listen to just a few words from the Buddha and instantly attain to enlightenment, arahantship. This is as a result of many previous lives of practice, and even living with previous Buddhas. So that is the explanation behind that, but also is a way of us understanding that we have been very fortunate, all of us, whatever we're doing now, whether we're Buddhist or whether we're practicing or whether we're not, to have been born into this lifetime, which is the human realm, exposed to the Dharma, and as a result of all of our punya karma, good meritorious deeds that we have partaken in during previous lifetimes, of which we have an indeterminable number. The next comment or question within this collection of a few, have you attained liberation? So monks are specifically not allowed to discuss their own attainments other than with their teachers or other members of the Sangha that they may have ordained at the same time as, so peer group, so to speak. This is for a number of reasons, but primarily it is that keeps any form of hierarchy or subjective rank being applied to the Sangha. What I mean by that is, if one is purported to have attained to arahantship, or even the first level of enlightenment, sotapanna, one might be regarded, rightly or wrongly, as very special, over and above a monk who may have been practicing and been in the robes for a long time and has not, or is not purported to having attained to any such level. And there would be impartiality there. So it is determined in the Vinaya, the rules for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, the monks and nuns, the ordained Sangha, that we do not discuss any abilities or levels of attainment with anyone other than our own teachers, whom we're dependent on, our preceptors, or acharyas, teachers. So this isn't a question you ask of Sangha members, but more importantly than that, it isn't or shouldn't be a question that is important to you of anyone for that matter, other than yourself, your own practice. It is your own attainments in this lifetime that you should be concentrating on, not those of others. The Sangha is treated as a holistic entity. So when you're offering to a monk, whether it be someone whom you believe is an arahant, or a junior monk, or even a monk of many years who has not attained to any levels of enlightenment, you are not offering to that individual personality, whether they be inconsequential or extremely charismatic. It's neither here nor there. Even whether they've been in the robes for 50 years, 5 years, or 5 months. It should be at the back of your mind, because your greatest offering of dana is that to the Sangha, not an individual monk. Even the Buddha said this. The punya karma, the meritorious benefits, are gained as a result of offering to the Sangha, not individual monastics within that Sangha. So your thoughts should be on your own actions of body, speech and mind. Dana, generosity, but primarily sila, moral virtue, your own practice, samadhi, meditation, and development of wisdom, panya. Okay, why is liberation necessary? Well, maybe if you are not practicing, you are not experiencing any form of suffering, then you might not see the necessity in trying to become free from suffering. However, you are experiencing suffering, you're just not noticing it because you're distracting yourself from that suffering by means of diverting your attention through sensual gratification. But eventually you will see, it will become quite clear to you that sensual gratification is never ending. You can never fulfill, you can never satiate that desire. It just leads to increased desire, thirst, craving. So if you're hiding your suffering with other distractions, you are allowing it to fester. But it will manifest itself at some point, and then you will see the necessity for liberation. So it is a practice of seeing clearly, developing the quality of vipassana through meditation that enables us to identify the causes of this suffering, these sufferings throughout our lives. But that suffering is quite clear. Whenever you feel the requirement, the need to just even move your body, it's as a result of suffering. If you need to go to the toilet, if you need to eat, any action is as a result of you trying to find something you don't have at that moment in time. As a result of suffering, whether you have not enough of something you want, or you need to get away from something you don't want. It's suffering. There is always suffering. And as a result of that, we look to become free from suffering during this lifetime. This is liberation. And then you go on to say that I am at the first of the 4 stages of sainthood. What stage have you reached? So I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but there are associated with Buddhism 4 stages of enlightenment. Sotapanna, stream entry, they call it, entering the stream, which is the first stage of enlightenment. Anagami, Satagami, and arahantship, but we don't need to concern ourselves too much with those labels. We should be striving towards Sotapanna, stream entry, which is the eradication of doubt, the eradication of personality view, the understanding that rites and rituals or anything of that superstitious nature is to be abandoned. Now I'm forgetting the other. So generally speaking, through these stages of enlightenment, a reduction in sensual desire and a gradual reduction of aversion, disliking, eradication of personality view, doubt, rites and rituals, and it'll come to me in a minute, so I'll come back to that. So again, once again, don't concern yourself with other people or even these labels, applying them to yourself. If you go to the doctor and he gives you a diagnosis of terminal cancer, how do you react? That is going to give you a good indication as to how well you have been practicing and how well and what you have attained as a result of that practice. If on that diagnosis you can get up, smile, and go about your business as unaffected as possible by that diagnosis with equanimity, then you've been practicing well. You have attained probably to the first stage of enlightenment. But if there is any reaction to that diagnosis whatsoever, then you have not. Okay, Bhante, there is so much violence happening right now. It is very difficult to stay present. Today, everyone is objectified as a group, Jews, Muslim, and so on, and hate has escalated, and I worry about the state of things today, and also you, Bhante. Please help us stay calm. For we who keep the precepts and are quiet, it's getting harder to ignore. So firstly, please don't worry about me. I'm very well supported and comfortable here and enjoying my own practice. And if you worry about others, you're not working on your own development. Now, I don't mean that in a selfish way, but if you don't help yourself, you can't help others. And in that respect, there's not much you can do to help the entire world. There's very little. If you have surplus funds, you might donate to charities that are active in distant lands or something like that, or more locally help close to where you live. But you cannot help the entire world. It is up to each individual to help themselves. But once again, the statements here is today everyone is objectified as groups, Jews, Muslims, so on. And today there is so much violence. When in history was this not the case? It has always been so. The only difference now is there is so much availability of information in the palm of your hand for you to be staring at all day long. Turn the damn thing off. Put it away. Unsubscribe to any news channels or click the button that says not interested. You do not need to know if you cannot and are not actively involved in helping in that direction. And even then, there's only so much you can do. This continual study of misery, which is in the main only to attract your attention, to get viewings, to get subscriptions, to get likes, to attract advertising revenue from those whom are feeding off your interest by advertising in those news feeds or in between. You're just participating in the commercial exploitation of others' suffering. Ignore it. You can ignore it. Turn your phone off. Turn the television off. Watch an old black and white Laurel and Hardy movie if you must entertain yourself. Charlie Chaplin, or, well, I was going to say Walt Disney, but that can be a little violent in some places also. Or whatever the equivalent modern day inert form of entertainment there is, if you must do anything at all other than meditation or listening to Dharma. But you're only exposing yourself to all of this to fuel your concerns and your worry out of choice. You don't need to. Locally, if things are happening, you'll be informed. I have no news or access to news information either in the written form or on any feeds or anything. But I heard about the flooding, which was local, and the subsequent disastrous consequences of that, because people whom I'm associating with directly would inform me, because it's appropriate for me to know what's going on in my neighbourhood. So don't purposely go out there to see what's happening in the far corners of the world. This is what we were talking about yesterday, asava, leakages. Rather than guarding your senses, you're opening them up to more invasion. You're violating your own peace and calm. So I can't help you to stay calm other than provide you with the tools to remain calm, which you already know are to guard your senses, guard what you're looking at and what you're listening to, and be selective of whom you associate with, and mindfulness of all of your body, the actions of body, speech and mind. Next comment. So even the most evil people doing terrible things in this lifetime could potentially make up for their karma in the next life. Not so. Potentially, in the next life, they may be subjected to an indeterminable amount of time in the hell realms, for instance, or the animal realms, where they would continue a life unable to practice in the light of Dharma, with the understanding of the Buddha's teachings, and be stuck there for, well, as I say, a time that is unquantifiable. So we have to make the determination to practice within this lifetime if we want to make up for any amount of terrible things we may have done either during this lifetime or in previous lifetimes, which are our actions, which is what karma is. So we can certainly, yes, having been born into the human realm, we have done an awful lot of good in previous lives. We have a huge bank of good karma, punya karma, good actions, meritorious actions, bonuses, benefits, interest on our savings that we can spend and enjoy in this lifetime, having the ability to practice knowing that comfortably, despite what we may have done up to now. As long as we determine that from now, this present moment, we will keep the precepts, and that determination as to what we do from now on is what is relevant within this lifetime. Now, it may be that we'll live a long time or a very short time, but if we have made that determination, we don't need to necessarily seek forgiveness atonement or anything of this nature. If there is the opportunity and it's appropriate to do so, we can apologize for our wrongdoings in the past and even explain our determination to never make those mistakes again, but only if it's appropriate to do so. What is important is your firm determination, adhitthana, like your New Year's resolutions or determinations to refrain from some unskillful actions in the future, and then adhering to those determinations. That is how you will find liberation within this lifetime. No good waiting until the next lifetime. You may find yourself in a realm inaccessible to Dharma. And this can be for a very, very long time, as you can imagine. Hello, you say that enlightenment isn't a destination or a place, that it is a state of mind. But you also say that it is about exiting the reincarnation cycle. If so, where does one go after death, if not back into the reincarnation cycle? So we say rebirth rather than reincarnation, not to be pedantic, but reincarnation means reborn in the same form with some of the same characteristics. Rebirth entails or includes none of your former life's physical or mental characteristics, only the results of the activities in that previous life. This life is the causes and consequences for your next life, your rebirth, a rebirth, if you're not liberated from that cycle of rebirth. So, if so, where does one go after death if not back into rebirth? Well, this is not known as in a way it can be described, because it is not of this conditioned realm in which we exist now. So we can only say what it is not. We cannot say what it is. We attain to Nibbana, where there is liberation from any rebirth. So final enlightenment, arahantship, leads to the attainment of, or is the attainment of Nibbana. Freedom from suffering during this lifetime, which can be experienced. One doesn't have to wait to die to experience Nibbana. And then when the physical body and thinking brain is no more, Parinibbana, that state, as a result of the conditions, causes and conditions you have put in place to attain to Nibbana, remains, but the physical body, thinking brain, that experiences that does not. It ceases without remainder. But one cannot describe this Nibbana as a place, or even a state of mind after the physical body and the thinking brain dies, because we have not experienced that yet. Because once experienced, you cannot return. And even if you could, as it is purported, the Buddha, whom has attained to Parinibbana, communicated, or even through devas communicated to certain arahants and disciples of his, even in latter day and recently, not possible to describe anything other than what it is not what it is. So nobody knows or can tell you and describe where it is that one goes. But you don't need to worry and think about that if you're putting in the practice now. It is something you will experience, and you can experience Nibbana when that question will automatically be answered for you, for yourself. It's experiential, not intellectual. Okay, hello Bante. Not sure if you have already responded to a question I asked about your thoughts on me living my life in a wholesome manner as possible, in as wholesome a manner as possible, in order to have a positive ripple effect for my next reincarnation. There's that word again, rebirth, if there is one. So karna is body, is meat. It means meat. It means that this physical meaty body is reborn. That's never going to happen. It just gets burnt in the fire or buried and rots with the maggots. It's gone. There's none of that going on here. Rebirth, a result of causes and conditions we put in place, or ignorance. A lack of causes and conditions to identify that ignorance is what results in rebirth. But anyway, sorry, continuing. My next rebirth, if there is one. Well, I think I've just responded to that in the previous question, and I'm continually talking about our practice, which is to that end, to ensure. You asked about my thoughts of living my life in a wholesome manner. So you're looking to do good in this life to have a result in a good rebirth, as opposed to attaining to Nibbana. Well, this means you're still attached to living. This is a result of avijja, which is the Pali word for ignorance. Whilst you're still attached to the physical body and the thinking brain and the life you are enjoying, even though you're only participating in wholesome and skillful activities, you're attached to it, and this will result in rebirth. And yes, maybe a good rebirth, but you cannot determine that. You do not know the fruition as a result of all of your previous lives' bank of karma. So one shouldn't put liberation, enlightenment, from freedom from suffering in this lifetime and freedom from rebirth on the back burner. One shouldn't leave it to simmer in the background. Oh, I'll do that later. Because you may not get the opportunity. As a result of previous lives' karma, whatever you do in this lifetime, however good, you may still have to suffer in the hell realms or animal realms. As a result of that, unless you take the opportunity now, within this lifetime, to liberate yourself from that chain of events. There's no putting it off. The only reason you'd want to put it off is because you're enjoying life so much and want to do it again. That's ignorance. You're not seeing the suffering you have. You may be enjoying life at the moment, but you could be suffering very soon. You may be hit by a bus, be paralyzed from the neck down, have to be fed, cleaned, unable to do whatever you want, even unable to communicate, for instance, maybe. Or you may just have an illness of severe pain. Will you want to experience that all over again? No. But even the small things you're not identifying as suffering. The fact that you are asking questions, which is good to develop knowledge. But these kinds of questions are demonstrative of you seeking something out of this life that simply isn't there. It's just the opportunity to escape this cycle of rebirth. Avijja. Oh, okay, so let's just check the time if I can. Yeah, plenty of time because this is a long one. and it may be too dark or problematic. Okay, this may be too dark or problematic for you to talk about, but what are the Buddha's thoughts on suicide? Oh, I see, yes. I've attempted to off myself. Excuse me, that's a very unsubtle form of terminology, isn't it? I'm not laughing at that sad situation, but I've attempted to off, it's the way you've put it, I'm afraid, sorry. Dear, dear. I've attempted to off myself a few times before and worried as to what that entails to my future and my karma. Pardon me if this is some basic Buddhist knowledge. I was raised Christian and to believe that suicide will automatically put you in hell. I'm sorry if this is a stupid question and not appropriate. I'm somewhat new to Buddhism and want to learn more. No, it is not a stupid question and it is not inappropriate. It's a very good question. And thank you for asking. So, killing. We must refrain from killing any sentient beings. That is inclusive of ourselves. And one should consider that as especially inclusive of ourselves. And whilst we don't believe in an eternal hell, as in Christianity, we have in Buddhism hell realms, and certainly killing of any form, especially a human, even yourself, can and will result in being in rebirth into those hell realms for a very long time, if not eternity, but a long time by comparison to this experience of life in this realm. In terms of karma, you are, however, whilst you maybe feel you are freeing yourself from suffering during this lifetime by, as you put it, offing yourself, you are going to cause others considerable distress. Even if you don't have close family and friends who will be so aggrieved at your death, and also so upset by the nature of your death that there was nothing they could do to help you, that you didn't feel you could approach them for support. You will give them a considerable amount of additional suffering to that they already have. In effect, passing on your suffering to others. But even if you don't have close family or friends of that nature, there will be people whom have to deal with your body, your carcass, your corpse, hanging there, or just rotting there in some corner, whom will also be hurt and disgruntled by this job of having to seemingly someone with no friends who couldn't be helped, who was suffering so much that they had to off themselves, as you put it. This is all bad karma you create, not only for yourself, but extra suffering you're creating to harm others psychologically. So we try not only to avoid killing, but avoid harming any sentient beings. And where your actions involve harming other sentient beings, this is bad karma and will result in an unfortunate rebirth. But what you can do, and what the Buddha does teach, is how you can really identify what suffering is, what the suffering in particular is that is causing you to feel this way. Why you are depressed, why you are anxious, why you are sad. What is it at the root cause of this deep unbearable suffering you are experiencing. Keep watching these talks on this channel and listening to the comments of others whom are also experiencing suffering in varying degrees, but will lead you to a better understanding as to where your suffering is coming from. In particular, you, whom has considered this drastic action and perhaps only avoided it because of the fear of banishment to eternal hell, know that it is true, it will not end your suffering. It will just increase that suffering in future lifetimes and the suffering of others that know you or are around you in this lifetime. It may fail, as you say you've experienced, and you know the result of that suffering. Identify what it is that's causing the suffering, the wanting something you don't have in your current life, or the not wanting of something you are experiencing in your current life. And try and find ways to undermine that cause of suffering. And the best way to do that without knowing you personally what the details of those causes for you are to keep these precepts, these simple precepts. You have commandments in Christianity which include these primarily, but just refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and taking of intoxicants, especially with focus on that fifth precept. Other than any medication you may be prescribed by a medical professional, no other substances that will affect your mental activity should be taken. Even if it means that life is boring and seems more sad. Bear with it and start to practice meditation along the lines we teach here and discuss here. And see how quickly you can start to identify the cause of your suffering. And once you identify that cause of suffering, we'll give you the tools collectively here as your friends in the Dharma, brothers and sisters in aging, sickness and death, support you in finding how to end that suffering. So you're not alone. Keep listening. Dear Bhante, would you please share how you made the transition from survival to being at peace with what is? To be okay with an open door outside where there are snakes and all kinds of unknowns. What was it like in the beginning when you first began living outdoors in your van as a layperson? How did you cope with the survival responses in mind and body to be able to be so at ease today? Well, I think I've described that enough previously, but I was practicing meditation. I was keeping precepts and practicing meditation, and therefore developing the qualities of the Brahma Viharas. They're called such, Brahma Viharas, because Vihara means house, abode, somewhere to live, dwelling place. And Brahma is gods, for want of a better word, not in a creator God, singular God form, but people of heavenly realms, gods, if you like. So, the house, the abode of the gods, Brahma Viharas, of which there are four. Metta, which is loving kindness, Karuna, compassion, Mudita, joy for others, or the opposite of jealousy and envy, and Upekkha, equanimity. So through the practice of keeping sila, moral virtue, and practicing meditation, developing samadhi and mindfulness, we develop wisdom, as well as these qualities of metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, as well as the characteristics of existence, understanding, seeing clearly, vipassana, those characteristics of anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, anatta, not self. Sound familiar? All these things I talk about every day on these talks, answering every question. There are the answers: sila, samadhi, panya, anicca, dukkha, anatta. And when one's been practicing for some time in the household life or within a monastery, then living outside is not even a consideration, a problem. It's no different to living inside. You could be living in a 5-star hotel, a luxury 5-star hotel on a beautiful island resort off the coast of Thailand, with everything going for it: air conditioning, heated pools, jacuzzis, a choice of luxurious restaurants, the best bedding, all of the luxuries of life. And within 20 minutes a tsunami can come along and wipe that all out just like that. Do you lay in that luxury hotel fearing that that might happen? No. Those luxury hotels, as this did happen, have been rebuilt, and 20 odd years later, people are now back there enjoying those comforts. Now, I know you're explaining, or you're relating to the more immediate dangers of snakes coming in through the door. If you've developed loving kindness, metta, and you're keeping precepts, you're giving that the best form of dana, generosity, you can offer is that of fearlessness to all beings. And by keeping the precepts, you give that gift of fearlessness to all beings. They don't want to harm you. I have all sorts of creatures wandering in and out of my kuti that I can't even describe or know the names of. At night, I just ignore them and they ignore me. We're doing each other no harm. There's no food in there. If I mistakenly leave a little bit of food that's there for cats or something and it's left out because they haven't finished it, more creatures will come in. But if it's cleaned up properly, less will come in. But they might come in to explore, inclusive of snakes. I ignore them. I don't notice them actually, but if I did, I'd just go back to sleep. They won't harm me as I won't harm them. I'm not food. There are no predators, so to speak, say tigers or lions, but even those might stay clear of a human. We're not that tasty, unless they felt threatened or they were really hungry. I think even sharks are not going to eat you in the sea unless you're already bleeding and therefore attracting their interest. They'll stay clear, and there are sharks here, and I have been in the sea on a number of occasions. But how do you cope with survival responses of the mind and body? Well, there aren't. You're not talking about survival responses of fight and flight here. You're talking about fear. And it can be attributed to irrational fear when you identify the real truth of the matter, that there is nothing to fear here. Another tsunami, which I understand we would get due warning of these days, but would be something one can fear here. We've had a cyclone. Trees falling are a danger. But you cannot predict, you cannot know. You can understand and avoid the risks. Try not to stand directly under, I try not to stand directly under a coconut tree which is laden with coconuts when I'm on Pindapata in the morning or just walking around, because those coconuts do fall regularly and they weigh a lot, and if one falls on your head, you are dead. Look very carefully when crossing a road. because those buses are never going to stop in time. They're going very fast and they will squash you. Don't swim in the sea when you know it's rough and there are very strong underlying currents. We don't take unnecessary risks. But sleeping outside, living outside, is really no more risky, in fact probably safer, than living in an apartment in a city, where all manner of accidents can happen. Most accidents happen in the home, it is said. Well, if you're homeless, then you're freeing yourself from most of those opportunities to have an accident. So there is nothing to fear. Okay. Should I leave a difficult person or use the relationship to learn patience? So, associate with the wise is one of the opening lines. Associating with the wise, if we have the opportunity to do so, the choice to do so, as opposed to associating with fools. And if you're in a relationship with a difficult person and you're able to walk away from that relationship, then it's okay to do so. And in fact, to be encouraged. There is no sense in associating with fools or remaining in a difficult relationship just to develop patience. Now, patience, khanti is the Pali word for patience, often described as patient endurance, is a process of enduring and developing patience to that which is difficult and that we cannot avoid. For instance, aging, sickness and death cannot be avoided. We can't walk away from that relationship we have with aging, sickness and death. So we have to become patient with failing eyesight, deteriorating hearing, failing bodies, pain, difficulties that are natural. But our associations with others, we do have some choice over. So in order to avoid undue suffering, where it's appropriate and possible to do so, we can walk away from inappropriate or difficult relationships, because there are many other aspects of life. There is so much anicca, dukkha, anatta that we will experience to develop patience with khanti already. We don't need to add an additional burden to that. If it is a relationship that you cannot walk away from, and I mean that is in rare cases, there is usually some way that you can extract yourself from a situation or ask for support of others to extract you, then you will need to use what patient endurance, patience you have already developed. And this will develop. If you have the seed of patience, it will grow as a result of practicing patience with the situation you are enduring. But without knowing the specific details of the situation, it's difficult to say. Certainly anyone in an abusive relationship where they are being harmed should, where possible, get away from it as quickly as they can, to avoid harming yourself and also allowing those that are harming you to harm themselves karmically as a result of their bad actions. Akusala karma. What does Buddhism say about romantic love? That it should not be clung to. Really what you're describing there is lust, passion, ragha tanha, a thirst for physical gratification in relationships, initially with romantic love, which may flourish into something deeper, a more spiritual form of loving kindness, love. And relationships work that way. But I think what you're describing there is, what is it saying about romantic love, is in those first experiences, throes of passion. It says this is just sensual desire and should not be clung to. It is just another distraction. If you're already in a relationship which is a loving relationship, you have love for your partner, then that's a different thing, and that can be maintained, mutually respected and nurtured, and you can be grateful for that. But to go out looking for love, dating, as enjoyable as that may be, it's just another sense or another form of entertainment distracting yourself from the realities of existence. If you're looking for relationships to be, well, like normal, let's say, I want to have a wife, I want to have a family and children, procreate. As long as you understand this is just your animalistic basic nature that's driving that force forward. It isn't necessary. There are plenty of children already for you to look after if you just want to do that. The world does not need any more children, that's for sure. And relationships, if you're not practicing, you'll seek solace, refuge in another through this form of romantic love. Whereas you can seek that refuge, but of a more substantial, permanent and more fruitful nature, in refuge in the Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, where you will have many relationships with others, kalyanamita, beautiful friendships, but they are unobscured by that ragha tanha, that passionate romantic love, passion, physical, sensual desire, and all that entails. It doesn't matter what people look like, sound like, how they are. People whom are practicing the Dharma, brothers and sisters in aging, sickness and death, or kalyanamita, are supportive of you with loving kindness, metta, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others. And these qualities can be enjoyed in many, many relationships. In fact, with your relationship with the world, with this realm, and the animal realms of all of nature. A far deeper and more spiritual form of love than this romantic love, if I'm understanding you correctly and that's what you mean. So you may be in it, so enjoy it, but given the opportunity, if you're not in it, don't seek it, don't look for more. Okay, so I think probably the final question here, do babies have delusion though? If so, babies are born pure only for a few moments, I'm assuming. So we're born as a result of ignorance. The result of birth is death. So it cannot be considered as a very wise choice. A baby in itself is born free from cultural defilements. or culturally influenced defilements, but born with the same instinctual nature as all beings when born, to survive, which requires feeding, some form of protection or comfort, and procreation. Those are what we're born with. And then we're educated as to how to manage those natural born conditioned. Very quickly at first, through just reward, punishment and reward. If we cry, we get fed. If we go to toilet, we get cleaned up. We soon learn that there is, through nurture, this protective environment around us. But we become clinging, we attach to those things we like, and we have aversion from those things we don't like. So we start to grow and develop greed and hatred. And at that point we have delusion, because we don't fully comprehend and understand the nature of greed and hatred. What this practice does is it dispels delusion by pointing that out very clearly, how greed will never satisfy our desires, and how hatred will never solve our problems. But understanding the cause of those desires, or what it is that we are averse to, we can eradicate that underlying cause, therefore developing wisdom, panya, and therefore eradicating ignorance, avijja. Now, delusion and ignorance are completely different things. Ignorance is having no information, so a baby is born ignorant, as well as with delusion, but it's only delusion if one has information but doesn't understand it. It's like confusion. So you can have the most intellectually knowledgeable people, even on the subject of Buddhism, whom can't keep precepts or don't keep precepts, who can't meditate or don't meditate, and therefore only have an intellectual understanding of Buddhism, which is worthless if you're not keeping precepts and practicing meditation. So that is delusion and avijja, ignorance. So yes, we're born as a result of ignorance, and the result of birth is death. We're born from the womb directly into a grave. There's just a delay where we hang around in this life with the opportunity to avoid that happening again by eradicating delusion, thinking there's anything other than this opportunity to eradicate that ignorance through dispelling delusion and seeing clearly the nature of existence, aging, sickness, and death. On that note, I hope there's something useful there, but if not, just let it go. But please come back again. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.